Machiavelli's trick to win all arguments. Have you ever stopped to think why, so many times, even though you are right, you end up losing an argument? How many times, when trying to defend your idea, have you noticed that the other person left with the last word, and you were left with only the feeling of frustration? The truth is that discussions are not just about facts, but about power, strategy, and the way words are used. And no one understood this better than Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance thinker who revealed how the game of power plays out behind the scenes of human relations. The trick he left is not just a persuasion technique, but a key to turning any debate into a quiet victory. Today you'll discover the secret that can change the way you handle every conversation, from family fights to conflicts at work. Get ready, because Machiavelli's trick is not about shouting louder, but about understanding how to flip power in your favor and earn respect in any discussion. Many believe that winning an argument depends only on having the best arguments, as if logic were enough to convince anyone. But Machiavelli observed that pure logic is rarely what decides a dispute. The human mind is driven by emotions, vanities, and the desire to have control. When we enter into an argument, we are not only struggling with ideas, but with the need that each one has to assert their position in the world. And that's precisely where most fail. They try to strike out rightly in a field dominated by pride. Machiavelli's trick begins with a detail that few realize. The real power in an argument is not in talking, but in observing. When you pay attention, you notice patterns, recognize weaknesses, and find the exact point where the other's speech can be redirected. It's as if you have the invisible reins of the conversation in your hands. Imagine a simple scene: two people arguing about politics. One of them gets excited, raises her voice, insists that she is right. The other, instead of rebutting, listens calmly, asks a small question that dismantles the opponent's certainty and, without raising the tone, puts doubt in the air. Who, in the eyes of all, seems stronger? It is not the one who shouted, but the one who knew how to conduct silence and doubt. This is the first step of Machiavelli's trick, to make the energy of the other work against himself. The thinker knew that, contrary to what we imagine, discussions are not won in a hurry. Whoever tries to rush the victory loses. Patience is the secret weapon. Listening for a long time, giving the other the feeling of dominance, while in fact you are just gathering information, is like making room for the opponent to tire on his own. When he finally relaxes, believing that he has won, it is time to insert a simple but well-placed sentence that shows a flaw in his logic. It is not necessary to dismantle the whole argument, it only takes one point that destabilizes it. The doubt generated spreads, and everyone notices. This trick is based on something Machiavelli repeated. People don't want the truth, they want the feeling of being right. So, instead of directly confronting, you need to give the impression that you respect the other's position. Use phrases like, "I understand what you're saying, it makes sense what you said," but then add a subtle idea that changes the direction of thought. This technique, known today as strategic concession, had been used since Renaissance times. The power is in allowing the other to maintain their dignity, while slowly leading them to their completion. In the small discussions of everyday life, this becomes even more powerful. Think of couples' fights, debates between friends, or work meetings. Most enter them with the eagerness to prove a point. But those who apply Machiavelli's trick understand that the goal is not to silence the other, but to dominate the environment. By giving the other the illusion of partial victory, you gain room for complete triumph. It's like playing chess. Sometimes, you put a piece aside to gain access to the king. Another essential aspect is to understand that discussions are, deep down, about who controls emotions. Whoever loses control first, loses the game. This is where Machiavelli shows his genius. Don't try to win with aggressiveness, because aggressiveness is predictable. Win with serenity, because the unexpected disarms. When the other expects attack and finds calm, he gets lost. Your mind begins to look for flaws in your own speech, and this makes room for you to lead. This first step of the trick is an invitation for you to change the way you see discussions. Don't go in to prove you're right, go in to understand the weakness of the other. Don't enter to win with arguments, but to win with strategy. And remember, Machiavelli did not teach to manipulate to destroy, but to understand that power is, above all, perception. Whoever seems stronger wins. Whoever conducts the perception of others has the power in his hands. If the first key to Machiavelli's trick lies in observing more than talking, the second is in understanding how words have the power to shape realities. Persuading is not just convincing, it is planting images in the mind of the other, images so strong that he comes to believe that they were created by himself. This is the central point of the occult art of persuasion. It is not about manipulating in a crude way, but about guiding thoughts in a subtle, almost invisible way. Machiavelli understood that human beings cannot resist the power of suggestion, especially when it comes in the form of questions. While answers close doors, questions open them. Think of a common argument, two people defending opposing points. The tendency is for each one to want to impose their vision with categorical, absolute phrases. But notice how everything changes when someone asks a simple question. Have you ever thought about whether it could be otherwise? Or, what if? We look at this problem from a different perspective. The mind, when it hears a question, cannot help it, it must seek answers. It is at this moment that the other's rigidity begins to weaken. Machiavelli knew that, instead of butting heads, the question opens cracks. And through these cracks, the idea you want to convey enters almost without resistance. Another powerful feature is silence. In discussions, silence is not the absence of an answer, but the most strategic of answers. When one speaks angrily, expecting immediate reaction, and finds only calm and silence, expectation is broken. The other gets lost, tries to fill the space, repeats words, contradicts himself. Silence works like a mirror, giving the other their own anxiety back. Machiavelli said that when a ruler kept silent in moments of tension, everyone came to respect him, because they interpreted this gesture as absolute self-control. In an argument, the same happens. Silence transmits strength and puts invisible pressure on the opponent. It is not, however, a matter of always silencing, but of alternating moments of speech and pause. When you talk too much, you deliver your cards. When he speaks little and listens a lot, he leaves the other exposed. Persuasion is precisely the balance between giving small doses of words and large doses of attention. What wins is not the number of arguments, but the ability to make the other believe that their own conclusions were born within them. That's why the art of persuasion requires more sensitivity than strength. It is necessary to perceive the tone of the voice, the choice of words, the gestures of the body. Those who learn to read signs can predict the next sentence of the arguer. And if you already know what the other person is going to say, you can set the stage for dismantling the argument before it's even over. Machiavelli understood that all power is born from anticipation. A leader who predicts the moves of his enemies wins without having to fight. A person who predicts the other's moves in an argument wins without having to get excited. Another Machiavellian strategy is to use the vanity of the other in your favor. Few admit it, but most people argue not to find out the truth, but to protect their image. Therefore, when you praise before correcting, you conquer ground. Phrases like, "This is interesting, but have you ever considered?" Or, "I understand where your idea comes from, and it has strengths, but..." They work because they feed vanity, while also opening space to insert a new vision. The trick here is simple. By tapping into the other's vanity, you disarm your defenses. When he feels recognized, he starts to listen more. In couple arguments, for example, this is visible. When someone starts with a direct attack, the other person closes down, erects barriers, responds with the same intensity. But when you start with acknowledgement, "I understand what you feel," the heart opens. From then on, the conversation is no longer war, but fertile ground for negotiation. Machiavelli, even though he spoke of kings and princes, knew that human psychology was the same in all relationships. The need for recognition is universal. Whoever masters this, dominates dialogue. It is also important to understand that persuasion is not only rational, but emotional. People rarely change their minds because of numbers, but they always change when they feel something deep. This means that, in a discussion, the narrative is more powerful than the statistics. Telling a short story, using a metaphor, Making the other imagine themselves in a certain situation has more impact than dumping data. Machiavelli recognized that governing was, in essence, telling good stories. Whoever dominates the narrative dominates the collective mind. In the workplace, this art is even more necessary. In meetings, for example, often the winner is not the one who has the best project, but the one who can present it in the most engaging way. An average idea, but told with conviction, passion, and clear storytelling, often outperforms an excellent idea poorly communicated. The same is true in discussions. The emotion in the tone, the care in the choice of words, the well-used metaphor, all this makes your vision penetrate deeper. But there is still a detail that completely transforms persuasion: predictability. The most common mistake in discussions is to fall into the predictable game, to respond as the other expects. If someone yells, you yell back. If someone accuses, you defend yourself. It's as if the conversation were a script already written. Machiavelli, however, teaches that the breaking of expectation is the most efficient weapon. When someone yells and you respond with serenity, the person is disconcerted. When someone accuses and you don't defend yourself, but ask a calm question, the script is broken. And when the script breaks, control changes hands. This art of inverting expectation is the backbone of the trick. Human beings rely on standards. When the pattern breaks, it loses balance. It is in this imbalance that you conquer space. By surprising, you not only weaken the other, but also win the attention of everyone around. People respect those who act in unexpected ways because it conveys intelligence and dominance. Basically, this is what Machiavellian persuasion is. Observe, ask, silence, praise, and break expectations. It is a dance in which each step is calculated not to crush the other, but to guide him. This is not vile manipulation, but strategic intelligence. After all, as Machiavelli himself would write, power is rarely in the hands of those who shout the loudest, but those who understand the deepest how the human mind works. If so far we have understood that the power in a discussion is not in speaking louder, but in observing, listening, and leading with subtlety, we have arrived at the heart of Machiavelli's trick, inverting the logic of confrontation. Instead of countering another's strength with your own strength, you redirect that energy, like a martial arts master who uses the opponent's weight against himself. This is the secret that separates those who always lose from those who win without apparent effort. It is not a matter of accumulating arguments, but of knowing the exact moment to put them into play. The trick starts with something seemingly simple, not to react immediately. When you wait, you give the other the feeling of being in control, but in fact, you are setting the ground. The opponent exposes himself, talks too much, commits exaggerations. It is in this excess that the gap lies. The most common mistake in an argument is to try to rebut each sentence, as if it were necessary to destroy all the arguments of the other. This is not only tiring, but also ineffective, because the more you counter, the stronger the other feels. Machiavelli knew that a single crack is enough for the entire structure to collapse. Think of an argument about money, for example. A person can line up several reasons to justify an exaggerated spending. If you try to contest every detail, you create resistance. But if you let the person talk until they repeat themselves, until they contradict themselves, a short, almost innocent sentence is enough to expose the flaw. But if this is true, why did you yourself say the opposite a moment ago? At that moment, all the weight of the previous speech turns against the speaker. You don't need to have dismantled everything, you just pointed out an inconsistency. The power of the trick lies in transforming the other's own speech into a weapon against him. Another essential aspect is to redirect the focus. Often, those who argue try to take the conversation to the field where they feel strongest. Machiavelli's trick is not to go down this path, but to change the terrain. If someone insists on talking about pure logic, take the discussion to personal experience. If someone relies on emotion, bring an objective datum. This change of ground is destabilizing because it forces the person to fight in a field that he does not dominate. And when the other leaves their comfort zone, they lose balance. It is in this displacement that you take control. The great insight is in the game of perception. In any discussion, it's not just what's said that matters, but how it's perceived. Those who watch, those who observe from the outside, tend to agree with those who show more control. This means that, even if your arguments are not impeccable, if you convey serenity and intelligence, the collective perception will be one of victory. Machiavelli understood this like few others. Victory is not only over the adversary, but over the eyes of those who watch. In public debates, in team meetings, even in a family conversation, there are always observers, even if silent. And winning over these observers is as important as defeating the interlocutor. The trick also involves something we call giving in to win. In many moments, Machiavelli recommended not to resist head-on, but to grant small victories to the other. Letting him believe that he has won part of the argument creates a false sense of superiority. However, when the right moment comes, you reveal the central argument, the one that dismantles the basis of all contrary logic. It's like letting the enemy advance ground only to surround them when they're vulnerable. The human mind works like this. When it relaxes believing that it has won, it becomes less attentive. And it is in this moment of inattention that victory becomes inevitable. To make this trick even more powerful, you need to learn to use language to your advantage. Words have different weight depending on the way they are said. Avoid verbs that sound like imposition, such as you have to or you have to. Replace with lighter constructions, such as have you thought of, or wouldn't it be better if? This subtlety reduces resistance. Instead of looking like you're in charge, it looks like you're suggesting. And interestingly, people accept ideas that they believe to be theirs better than those that they perceive as imposed. Machiavelli's trick also requires control of one's emotions. There is no point in trying to reverse the game if you yourself fall into the trap of anger. The true strategist learns to take a deep breath, to use calm as a weapon. When someone loses control, they reveal weakness. When you maintain control, you convey authority. It's not just about winning the argument, but about showing that you're more in control of yourself than the other. This impression is engraved in the memory of all who witness it. In work discussions, for example, this trick can be decisive. Imagine a meeting where someone attacks your idea harshly. Most would react defensively, trying to justify themselves. But if you remain serene, listen, recognize one point or another of the argument, and then launch a sentence that changes the direction of the conversation, everyone notices. You have not only defended your position, but you have done so gracefully. This elegance is the mark of those who win without having to crush. Another facet of the trick is to never get into an argument without first knowing the terrain well. Machiavelli said that the wise ruler always studies his enemies before battle. Similarly, in an argument, the more you know about the other, the easier it will be to lead them. Knowing the beliefs, values, weaknesses, and strengths of those in front of you is like having the map of a castle before invading it. You know where to attack and where not to waste energy. The mistake of many is to enter blindly, without preparation. But the strategist never fully improvises. He always has cards saved. This trick can also be applied outside of formal debates. In simple everyday conversations, in family conflicts, in love disagreements, the same logic is repeated. It's not about crushing the other, but about earning respect. Because, in the end, the discussion is not only about who is right, but about who comes out of it more admired, more recognized as someone who deserves to be heard. Machiavelli teaches us that winning every argument does not mean humiliating others, but building an image of strength and intelligence. When you master perception, even those who don't agree with you leave the conversation acknowledging your ability. This is the invisible triumph, winning not only in content, but in form. Thus, Machiavelli's trick to win all arguments can be summarized in 3 invisible steps: observing more than talking, using the other's speech against himself, and redirecting the focus at the right time. But the real secret is in the timing. Saying the right phrase at the right time is worth more than an encyclopedia of arguments. It's precision that defines victory, not the amount of words. In the end, to understand Machiavelli's trick is to realize that discussions do not have to be noisy wars, but silent fields where the one who dominates perception wins. Winning does not mean crushing the other, nor proving superiority at any cost. It means gaining respect, guiding the conversation so that, even if they disagree with you, the other person leaves with the feeling that they have learned something, that they were led by someone who knows more than meets the eye. This is the invisible triumph, not only to be right, but to appear wise in the eyes of the beholder. Applying this in everyday life is simpler than it seems. At home, instead of arguing aggressively, you can use questions to open up space and show paths. At work, instead of competing for who speaks the most, you can use silence and patience as weapons of authority. In friendships, instead of trying to impose your vision, you can make small concessions and, in the end, lead the group to your idea. In all contexts, the pattern repeats itself. Those who control emotions control the discussion, and those who control the discussion win the victory. Machiavelli knew that power was always less in the words spoken and more in the way they are used. The trick is not to shout, it's to reverse. It's not attacking, it's redirecting. It is not winning by force, but by intelligence. Thus, by applying this secret, you discover that you can win any argument without having to fight, because the real power is not in defeating the other, but in conducting the game in such a subtle way that everyone leaves believing that you were born a winner.